Good morning. Good morning. May God bless you. So today we celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Sister Suhei's baptism. It's actually tomorrow, but it was the closest Sunday. It's today. So March 31st, 2024, she was the first baptism in which I was involved in this congregation, and so it means a lot to me. And as she was baptized, some of the things that we've seen in Nehemiah are probably an indication of what a Christian goes through. Here's just a little recap of what we've seen, according to what I think we've seen. Chapter 1, the wall has the leader. He has a calling, Nehemiah has a calling, and Sister Suhei probably had a calling, and she found people here who led her in the way of Jesus. Number 2, chapter 2, the wall has the support of the king. And so, we've seen that Nehemiah has the support, and he is sent by the king, or by God, but through the king, to Judah. Chapter 3, the wall has the team. Everybody was working. In fact, one of the things that you may notice in chapter 3 is Nehemiah is not even mentioned. Everybody was building part of the wall. Nehemiah is not even mentioned. We get to chapter 4, and the first few verses tell us what's next for a lot of Christians. And it says that when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he became furious. He mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria and said, "What are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble?" So, a lot of times our lives are like mounds of rubble. And here's the question Sanballat asked. Can they actually do something with mounds of rubble? Can they bring those stones back to life? And some of us have proved that we have. And Sister Suhei is one of those that she proved that. Verse 3 says, "Then Tobiah said, 'Indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they are building, he would break down their stone wall.'" So here's my intake of chapter 4. The wall has the critics. That's kind of like a little bit what a lot of people go through in a spiritual life. You found your leader, you found your support, you found your team, your family, your church, and then you start getting the critics. And so God's people do face criticism. That's a thing that happens. And as God's people, we do not have a license to criticize others, even if we disagree with them. Criticism is not the way to solve anything. It is not the way of Jesus. Matthew chapter 7, Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye?" Last night I went to play soccer. I took the church jerseys to this place, and it was about 24 guys. We've been playing together for a while now. Early in the scrimmage, in the match, the ball hit my right eye. I don't know if you noticed it today. Maybe some of you did and didn't say anything. Shelby sure did say something. Thank you, which I like, because I was waiting. Will somebody notice? I got something in my right eye. So the ball hits me really, really hard. It's been a long time that the ball had not hit me that hard in my head, which is kind of funny because I got a big head. It's kind of hard to miss. But the ball hit me right in my right eye. I went down to the floor, and then I got up, and the whole match, I couldn't see with my right eye. And I thought about this text, and I was like, man, I wish somebody could come and fix it. And it felt like I had a plank in my eye. You know what I mean? Have you ever felt that? And the first thing that I thought was, Great, now I go home with a black eye, and Catherine is going to think I got into a fight. And I got to preach tomorrow 2 sermons, one in English, one in Spanish. And also, on social media, people are going to think, hey, that preacher got into a fight the night before. Now, I didn't get into a fight. But the ball hit me, and I was like, I just wish somebody could come and take something out. There was probably nothing in it. But all I could see was blur. Like, it was blurry the whole time. And hurting. And sometimes we feel like that, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes we just feel like we just want to get everybody's planks out of their eyes, when we actually have a big plank. I've got a couple of books. I think both of them Derek gave to me for some reason. Derek is like my book provider. But both books are from the same author, Andy Stanley. I love Deep and Wide. Did you give that to me as well? Right, you did. Of course. And the second one is Visioneering, which is this one. I love this book. I've been reading it, and it's amazing. And it's doing me really, really good. And so Andy Stanley, he's got like mega church in Atlanta and all of that. Well, he writes here, and he says, whenever you attempt to bring about change, right? And we spoke about this before. Whenever you attempt to bring about change, it plays on the insecurities of those who have grown accustomed to the way things are and have always been. I mean, it's kind of like organic. It's natural that, nobody likes change. I mean, Amy was telling me something about change at work, and nobody likes change. And I was like, I think there's a slide about that in the sermon. So there you go. In this way, a vision is often seen as a threat. Somebody has a vision. Oh, it's a threat because we already are doing things one way. Consequently, it is not uncommon for the negative emotions a vision stirs up in people to be unleashed in the form of criticism. So somebody has a new vision, and the response is criticism. What you are convinced should be will be perceived by others as the very thing that should not be. And you say, this is the great idea I have. This is the solution. And somebody may say, that's actually what we need the least. And that happens. And people experience that. Andy Stanley writes it because, there is a reason. He probably experienced that as well. To make matters worse, the critics appear to be armed with the facts. Often they have history and experience on their side. Does it sound familiar to you at all? In some ways, maybe, maybe not. Well, there's a way in which Nehemiah handled criticism. And so the first thing that I want to look at today is how to handle criticism according to what we read in chapter 4. And here's how to handle criticism. Number one, give it to God, which means for us, pray. But more than that, a lot of times we pray and we don't give it to God. You see the difference? You can pray and still control it. Or you can pray and release and give it to God. So verse 4, this is the way Nehemiah prays. I've never prayed like this. Listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads. Have you ever prayed like that? I've never prayed like that. But there's a biblical example of someone that is really ticked off by criticism. By outsiders. And I want to point that out. Outsiders. And he is really ticked off. The way that he prayed, I've never prayed like that. So I wonder, will I ever be in that position? And I hope not. But he prayed like that. And he said, do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders. Later on in verse 9, he says, so we prayed to our God. On and on in this chapter, and it's only got like 23 verses, they give it to God. Now remember this. They are building a wall around Jerusalem. But even though they're building the wall, they have to give it to God. Number 2, continue your vision. This is one of those, cheesy things that sometimes people don't like to hear. I get it. I started counseling. My wife is a psychologist. People don't like to hear, hey, just, keep on going. That doesn't really solve anything if somebody is having issues. But here's what we see. Verse 6, and this is probably my favorite verse out of the whole chapter. Nehemiah says, so we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to have its height. For the people had the will to keep working. I like that word there. People had the will to keep working. The will. Sometimes you just got to be intentional and say, we have to keep working, or do we actually want to keep working? And we have the willingness to keep working. When things get tough, when life gets rough, when things are not going according to your plan, or when things are actually going according to your plan and you receive criticism and people start trying to get you down and to destroy what you have been building, press on, keep on. It is hard. Those are hard words to hear. Because sometimes you get up and you say, I don't really feel like continuing with this or with my life or with my spiritual life or going to this congregation. And I get it. Some people don't feel like that. I mean, lucky all of you that get to choose. I am the only person in this congregation that cannot say, hey, I'm going to a different congregation, right? I am hired here. What if I say, hey, I'm going to keep being hired here. I'm going to go to another congregation. That probably wouldn't work. But it is also a blessing to say, I want to make this work, and I have the willingness, and I want to be intentional because I have to, but also because I want to. And so, verse 15, he says, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. On and on, they kept going back to work. They had things that were going on, and they went back to work. Verse 21, the same thing. So we continued the work. They kept on going. This week, Monday, we went to Spencer, to the congregation there, met some people. Some of them know probably some of you. They had a VBS, and so does the children here and singing songs, for children, and we had a blast, and I had a blast. I really like that. I was sitting here in the kids section by mistake, but hey, it felt right along. I'm in my spot. I was singing with the kids, doing all the things, the hippopotamus, all of that. It was really cool. Oh, by the way, there's Jeff. He was here last Sunday. He spoke to us. Great lessons. And then we went to eat ice cream. Anyway, the story is that we took Amy and Donna. And on the way there, we're talking. And on the way back, somehow we started talking about university because college students, they met. And Amy was talking with me a little bit about college. And I was like, Amy, she's a junior in high school. And I asked her, do you actually want to go to college? That's a question. You can ask your teens or your kids, do you actually want to go to college? And she said, but I can't. Somebody, a professional, has told me I cannot apply. I almost slammed the brakes, I was like, what? Somebody has told you that you cannot even apply for school? Yeah. By the way, I asked her this week if I could say this to you, and she said yes. So I said, really? And then I'm going to quote her because those words I'll never probably forget. She said it in Spanish, but I'll say it in English. And she said, Diego, I want to go to college so bad. I was like, whoa. I was like, for most kids your age, parents and others will be like trying to convince them to go to college or something. I don't know, maybe. Here you are telling me, I want to go to college so bad. I said, you've got like 50% already, covered. You want to go to college. And it made me think of the lesson when you receive criticism by others and they cut your wings and they get you down. And here's what Andy says. Regardless of what's driving your critics, if you let them get to you, your candle will go out. You will lose heart. You will give up. What could be and should be will never be, at least not as a result of your labor. And when your dream dies, when our dream dies, a part of you dies as well. So keep on going if you want to. And you're here today, and you know what I get? You're here today because you want. Some of you may be here also because you feel like you have to. But for the most part, you want to be here. And so if you want to be here, I say, keep on. Keep on going. Number 3, make the necessary adjustments. I didn't add the necessary because it was too long. I want to keep it short. Make the necessary adjustments. Sometimes you don't have to make adjustments, especially for a guy. If it ain't broken, why fix it? But sometimes adjustments are necessary. So when Sanballat and company heard that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. See, the critics now have a team of a bunch of people whose names we cannot even pronounce. But these are the critics, and they're furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. They did something because of that. They adjusted. It doesn't mean that you have to adapt to everything. But sometimes along the way, when you have a vision, you make adjustments. Verse 11, and our enemies said, they won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work. That escalated quickly. As far as I know, up until now, there wasn't a talk about killing anybody. In verse 11, now they added, we can go in and kill them. And in a spiritual sense, that happens a lot. Sometimes, you have your critics, you receive criticism, and those people, they're just trying to, they just have differences in opinion. They see things different. The perspective is different. But sometimes it escalates. And now it's a matter of spiritual warfare. And we don't want that. Let me tell you, if we ever have that, or if we have that in our congregation, we're not happy about it. And I hope you're not happy if we have a warfare. God is not happy. Nehemiah, up until now, handled the criticism from outsiders. External criticism, I call it. But how do you actually handle internal criticism? How do you do that? See, in life, criticism may come in the form of different people, such as peers, parents, teachers, coaches, and colleagues, and many other people. So here's my experience. In my experience, the perception of criticism varies significantly based on the individual providing it, which means the closer the person, the closer the relationship, the harder it gets to feel criticized. I don't know if you agree with that, but that has been my experience. See, the kid, those people in his life or her life, peers, teachers, coaches, colleagues, parents, all those 5 people, types of people in my life have been fundamental for me in how I feel criticized. And some of God's people may begin criticizing God's work at some point. And that happens. For what I've seen being here a year and a half, a year and 7 months almost, I don't really see or feel any criticism from outsiders. To be honest, I don't see anyone like an atheist coming here to criticize us. I don't see anything in the news. I don't see anything in newspapers or magazines talking about Green Bay Church of Christ. It's like we don't have criticism from outsiders as far as I'm concerned. But sometimes in God's church, God's people began criticizing the work. And this happened in verse 10 a little bit. In Judah, this is Nehemiah writing, in Judah it was said, the strength of the laborer fails, since there is so much rubble. We will never be able to rebuild the wall. I have underlined those words. They may be not criticism to you. They may not look like that. Maybe they were not, criticism to the leadership and to the work, but soon enough, it can turn into criticism. And sometimes we may have that. We may have internal criticism from the insiders, criticism from us. And we got to work on that. So the last thing I want to share with you was to keep it distant. To handle criticism, one way to do it is to keep it distant. You cannot avoid criticism. You cannot eliminate it probably. But you can let yourself affect it to a degree. Verse 14. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles and everybody else, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord, and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes. When our enemies heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. Here's the thing. They wanted to attack the inside of the wall. They wanted to attack the wall. Nehemiah's way of handling it was, let's keep them out of the wall. Let's try to keep the critics distant. Let's try to keep criticism distant. Nehemiah avoided a common mistake, according to Andy Stanley, associated with criticism. He didn't allow his enemies to become the focus of his attention. Our natural response to criticism is to defend ourselves. And so Nehemiah, to a degree, provided defense. This is especially true when our vision is under attack. We are tempted to begin a dialogue with our critics or with those who are parroting their criticism. Consequently, we waste energy and thought trying to answer questions for people who are often not really interested in answers. Without realizing it, our focus begins to shift. Instead of being vision-centered, we slowly become critic-centered. I don't know if this is you. I don't know how much of this lesson has application to you, to your life, to your personal life, to your spiritual life, or to your leadership. Most of you seated here in this room today have a type of leadership, spiritual leadership. And sometimes you could forget that once you were vision-centered, and now you are critic-centered. That's why many, many times when I'm sitting down and there's a Bible study and it talks about other people and other religious groups, and I see articles about that, it bothers me. Because the culture that we're creating or that we've created or that I've been involved in is about the critics. And I don't want to be in a culture that is critic-centered. So I just want to end with 2 questions today. Number 1, can you be like Nehemiah and handle criticism? Are you able to handle criticism? Can you do it in a healthy way? Can you be like Nehemiah? And if not, perhaps you may need help from God. Perhaps you may need to give it to God. Perhaps you need encouragement to continue on. Perhaps you just need to make some necessary adjustments in your life. Second question. Can you be like Jesus and avoid or stop criticizing others? If you feel like you have been the person like Sanballat and company criticizing others, or people in the inside of the wall working and building the wall but started criticizing the work, perhaps you need help and you may need prayers. Sister Suhei was baptized a year ago. I'm not sure if she's faced any type of criticism yet. Perhaps she has some type of discouragement in 1 year of being baptized. What lies ahead for her is probably a lot of criticism. Not just from outsiders. I mean, that will probably happen. She may have people in her life and family members who are outsiders to the church who may provide criticism. But at some point, she may even face criticism within ourselves, within our group. So remember, we got Christians, people who are coming to this church, who may be discouraged a great deal by the criticism that they see, the criticism that they may receive or that they see among others. And then one day she gets to decide if she joins the group of the builders or she joins the group of the critics. I hope this lesson has some application for you in your life. I want to thank you for your time. May God bless you.